Amid infighting, Congress passes a bill to avoid a shutdown that would impact 2 million workers, from air travel to food aid. It follows a last-minute move by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who abandoned an attempt to appease hard-right GOP members with his own plan. The Senate will now consider the House-drafted CR. The United States Congress. The United States Congress is the legislative branch of the federal government of the United States. It makes the laws that govern our daily lives and shares power with the executive branch, led by the President of the United States, and the judicial branch, composed of the Supreme Court and other lower courts. Its responsibilities include passing bills to fund the government, holding hearings to inform the legislative process, and conducting investigations to keep the executive branch accountable. The House voted 335 to 91 on Saturday to pass a stopgap spending measure to avoid a federal shutdown. The bill contains funding for natural disaster relief and does not contain new aid to Ukraine, which was a key demand by conservatives. The Senate passed the measure later in the day, and it was sent to President Joe Biden to be signed into law. In a stunning turn of events, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy abandoned his demands for steep spending cuts and turned to Democrats to save a hostage crisis that threatened tens of thousands of workers' paychecks. He vowed to risk his job by putting the measure on the floor in order to avert a damaging lapse in federal funds. He backed down from his earlier plan to bring up a bill that included steep budget cuts and strict border provisions that most Republicans opposed. He faced resistance from a hard-right faction that had made clear they would support a shutdown in order to drive home their message that Washington is broken and federal spending is out of control. The House's move to pass the bill came hours before a midnight deadline. The Senate quickly followed suit, jettisoning a version of the bill that contained new funding for Ukraine and passing the House's version on an 88-9 vote. The whirlwind congressional action averted a shutdown of the entire federal government. It left in place the current level of funding through mid-November. Congressional leaders had already canceled an October recess to focus on the year-long spending bill, and they are expected to work through the weekend. Its responsibilities. The United States Congress plays a critical role in funding the federal government and preventing shutdowns. But it is not without its challenges, and a number of factors are at play in bringing the country to the brink of another budget crisis. The federal government is a complex institution with many moving parts, and it is difficult to ensure that all of them are working properly. This is especially true when Congress comes up against the clock to pass spending bills. In this session, the House and Senate will face a major challenge in approving appropriations bills that meet all of their requirements. The U.S. Congress passed a bill Saturday to avoid a shutdown, but the fight over a longer-term deal is far from over. Congress will now face a mid-November deadline to reach an agreement. This is likely to be an even more difficult task, as the two parties continue to disagree over a variety of issues. In a dramatic turn of events, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy backed down from his hardline demands on spending cuts and relied on Democrats to pass the measure. His move averted a shutdown that would have impacted millions of workers, including military service members, and caused the closure of government services, from parks to food inspections. It also averted a potential debt default, but it may still have consequences for the Speaker's job. Congress has a long history of using shutdowns as a negotiating tactic, and this pattern continues to hurt the American people. It is time to stop this practice and provide a permanent solution that will ensure that all Americans have access to essential government services. This is why I have introduced the End Shutdowns Act with my colleague, Senator Tim Kaine. The bill would take away the ability of both the House and Senate to use shutdowns as a negotiating tool. It would initiate an automatic continuing resolution on October 1 if no appropriations bill is passed by that date, and it would prevent the Senate from passing any other legislation outside of emergency scenarios until Congress reached an agreement on a long-term funding deal. Its members. Each year, Congress must pass 12 appropriation bills to fund federal agencies. If lawmakers don't pass these bills by October 1, a government shutdown will occur. A shutdown can be avoided temporarily if Congress passes a short-term funding bill. This is usually called a continuing resolution or CR. The House and Senate have different plans to avert a shutdown, but they will need to reach an agreement. A government shutdown affects millions of Americans and would have significant consequences for the economy. Thousands of workers would be furloughed, and those who stay on the job may not be paid. Many services, from air traffic control to food safety inspections, could be affected. The shutdown would also affect companies that sell products to government agencies, such as office supplies and hotel rooms. In addition, tourists who visit national parks and monuments would be turned away. The United States is the largest economy in the world, and it's important that it continues to grow. A federal shutdown can slow the economy and damage confidence. The last one lasted for more than 3 weeks, and it was caused by political infighting between Republicans and Democrats. This year's budget standoff is more serious than ever, and the government shutdown could last for weeks. Republican leaders in the House and Senate are working on different plans to avert a shutdown, and they will need to agree on a plan that can get bipartisan support. The Senate's version of the bill has passed both chambers, but the House has not yet taken up the measure. The House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, has promised to let the Senate's bill take up the floor, but he is struggling to secure enough votes. Several members of the House of Representatives are urging their leadership to move on to a long-term spending plan that will avoid a government shutdown. The top Democratic members are Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, and Ed Markey. Pelosi has sponsored more bills that have become law than any other senator, while Markey has sponsored the most House bills that have become laws. It's rules. The United States Congress works to avoid shutdowns by passing appropriations bills. These bills set spending levels for specific departments and agencies. Congress must pass these bills before the beginning of each fiscal year on October 1st. Failure to do so will result in a federal shutdown. The shutdown would disrupt many services and cause federal employees to miss work. It would also affect the operations of museums, national parks, and other public institutions. The government's food aid program for pregnant women and infants and a key community health program for low-income families would stop running. In addition, it would halt inspections by the Environmental Protection Agency and other important government functions. However, Congress could change how the system works to avoid a shutdown in the future. For example, it could amend the Anti-Deficiency Act to ensure that workers are paid if a shutdown occurs. It could also pass longer-term appropriation bills. This would give Congress more flexibility in setting spending levels and avoiding shutdowns. During a shutdown, all non-essential government agencies must shut down. The exceptions are those that provide vital services to the public, such as the mail service and Social Security payments. The government will also stop providing financial support to children's Head Start programs and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as food stamps. The Food and Drug Administration's food safety inspections and EPA environmental monitoring would also cease. A government shutdown is a complicated political issue, and it's difficult to predict how long it will last. In the past, Congress has been able to avoid shutdowns by negotiating with the White House and relying on Democratic votes to pass funding bills in the Senate. However, this time, the fate of the bill hinges on the House. It's not clear whether the Republican leadership will back a bipartisan bill or continue to push for steep spending cuts. A shutdown will have a significant impact on the nation's economy. The federal workforce will be forced to go without pay and many businesses will be unable to function. In addition, it will cause delays in government contracts and prevent the Department of Homeland Security from issuing visas. The shutdown will also disrupt airport security and national parks, and it will affect federally funded research, food and water safety inspections and other crucial government activities.